Number one, Ibble Dibble here. Hello, friends. So, can we chat about the spare interviews? I did see the full 60 Minutes interview with Anderson Cooper and the full ITV interview with Tom Bradby. They were both good. They had different strengths. The 60 Minutes interview is shorter, perhaps harder hitting. The ITV interview was longer and definitely had more detail. I took notes. I just want to talk about them. It will take me around 2 videos to cover the 60 Minutes interview. I believe two or three to cover the ITV interview. So bear with me. I'm going to try to do it over the next couple days. I'll be labeling them part 1, 2, and so forth. Let's chat about the 60 Minutes interview. Number 1. The first thing that struck me was Harry's claim that his comments about William weren't intended to be, in Cooper's words, cutting.
I looked at Willie, really looked at him, maybe for the first time since we were boys. I took it all in. His familiar scowl, which had always been his default in dealings with me, his alarming baldness, more advanced than my own, his famous resemblance to Mummy, which was fading with time, with age. It's pretty cutting.
I don't see it as cutting at all. My brother and I love each other. I love him deeply. There has been a lot of pain between the two of us, especially the last 6 years. None of anything that I've written and anything I've included is ever intended to hurt my family.
This to me is typical narcissistic playbook. A narcissist believes they can say whatever they want about anyone, but most particularly their nearest and dearest, and again, treat anyone, but most particularly their nearest and dearest, however they want, as long as they verbally profess to love them when asked. It's offensive, it's transparent, and the sad part is it often works. It works on the children of narcissists who don't know what a loving parent is. It works on the partners of narcissists who perhaps have never had a loving partner before, or who previously were love bombed into believing this person now treating them so poorly is actually a good person they're simply misunderstanding. The love lie is the root of all gaslighting. And opening with this anecdote, I think Cooper really shows us how out of touch Harry is with the impacts of his own behavior. Number 2, Harry describes the guilt he felt receiving the attention he craved from his mother's mourners when he and William were doing a walkabout following her death.
Harry says his memories of the next few days are fragmented, but he does remember this, greeting mourners outside Kensington Palace in London the day before his mother's funeral.
When you see those videos now, what do you think?
I think it's bizarre because I see William and me smiling. I remember the guilt that I felt.
Guilt about?
The fact that the people that we were meeting were showing more emotion than we were showing. Maybe more emotion than we even felt.
They were crying, but you weren't.
There was a lot of tears, and I talk about how wet people's hands were, and I couldn't understand it at first.
Their hands were wet.
Their hands were wet from wiping their own tears away.
The way he describes it, I think he still hasn't worked this out about himself, that he actually really enjoys attention. I believe him when he says he hates the press. But I also think he's never been able to reconcile or perhaps even consciously acknowledge how much he absolutely adores the attention. Number 3, he relays his belief until the age of 23, a rather advanced age, that Diana had simply abandoned him and William rather than died.
You didn't believe she was dead?
For a long time. I just refused to accept that she was gone. Part of, she would never do this to us, but also part of maybe this is all part of a plan.
I mean, you really believed that maybe she had just decided to disappear for a time?
For a time, and then that she would call us and we would go and join her.
He calls this belief hope, not paranoia or fantasy.
You write in the book, you say, I'd often say it to myself first thing in the morning, maybe this is the day. Mm-hmm. Maybe this is the day that she's going to reappear.
Yeah, hope. I had huge amounts of hope.
He held on to that hope into adulthood. When Harry was 20, he asked to see the police report about the crash that killed his mother.
The files contained photographs of the crash scene. Why did you want to see it?
Mainly proof that she was in the car, proof that she was injured, and proof that the very paparazzi that chased her into the tunnel were the ones that were taking photographs of her lying half dead on the backseat of the car.
Harry says he believed his mother might still be alive until he was 23 and visited Paris for the first time.
He still, at the age of 38, 39, doesn't recognize or accept that he's prone to paranoia and or fantasy through nature and or nurture, and that dealing with this interpretive tendency has to be bumped up on his to-do list. Number 4, he claims he's blamed the British press for his mother's death since he was 12, and that he numbed the resulting pain with drink and drug and considers that bad behavior.
You say war didn't begin in Afghanistan, it began in August 1997.
Yeah, the war for me, unknowingly, was when my mum died.
Who were you fighting?
Myself. I had a huge amount of frustration and blame towards the British press for their part in it.
Even at 12, I mean, at that young, you were feeling that toward the British press?
Yeah, I mean, it was obvious to us as kids, the British press's part in our mother's misery. And I had a lot of anger inside of me that luckily I never expressed to anybody, but I resorted to drinking heavily because I wanted to numb the feeling, or I wanted to distract myself from whatever I was thinking. And I would, resort to drugs as well.
Yet, he credits doing mushrooms and ayahuasca with the quote-unquote right people with wiping away his grief.
You write in the book about psychedelics, ayahuasca, psilocybin, mushrooms.
I would never recommend people to do this recreationally, but doing it with the right people, if you are suffering from a huge amount of loss, grief, or trauma, then these things have a way of working as a medicine.
They showed you something. What did they show you?
For me, they cleared the windscreen, the windshield, the misery of loss. They cleared away this idea that I had in my head that my mother, that I needed to cry to prove to my mother that I missed her, when in fact, what she wanted was for me to be happy.
In other words, it's okay if Megan and her hippy-dippy Cali friends medicate him, but it's not if he self-medicates with his public school chums. All of this sounds to me like a real refusal of adult responsibility. He goes on and on about other people's lack of accountability, but I'm not getting self-awareness. I'm not getting personal accountability from him. Number 5, he says the military gave him purpose because it helped him temporarily stop ruminating on his mother's death and the resultant pain. Anderson presses him a bit, asking if it wasn't simply a distraction. And Harry insists that it gave his life meaning because he was working towards the greater good, an idea I feel he's fully latched onto.
Harry now says it wasn't until he served in combat with the British Army in Afghanistan that he finally found purpose and a sense of normalcy.
My military career saved me in many regards.
How so?
Got me out of the spotlight from the UK press. I was able to focus on a purpose larger than myself, to be wearing the same uniform as everybody else, to feel normal for the first time in my life, and accomplish some of the biggest challenges that I ever had. I was training to become an Apache helicopter pilot. You don't get a pass for being a prince.
The Apache doesn't give a crap about who you are.
No, there's no Prince autopilot button that you can press and just takes you away.
He believes that everything he does is for the greater good of the British people simply because he is a prince, not because he's really weighed the intentions behind the impacts or the efficacy of his behaviors. Number 6, he thought it was reasonable for him and William to ask Charles not to marry Camilla because they were happy already. Why rock the boat, etc., etc.
You and your brother both directly asked your dad not to marry Camilla.
Yes.
Why?
We didn't think it was necessary. We thought that it was going to cause more harm than good, and that if he was now with his person, that surely that's enough. Why go that far when you don't necessarily need to? We wanted him to be happy, and we saw how happy he was with her. So at the time, it was okay.
Now, this is normal for teens and young adults to not want their parents to remarry following the other parent's death. But that he still hasn't changed his tune, again, at almost 40, is surprising simply because it highlights that he is unable to accept the same criticism of his relationship with Meghan. It was okay for William and Harry to say, falling in love with an unpopular divorcee known for Tampaxgate is all well and good, but perhaps she won't make the best queen. But it was not okay for William and Charles to say, falling in love with a divorcee American actress from a broken home is all well and good, but perhaps she won't make the best princess. Number 7, he seems to believe positive publicity is a zero-sum game where if one royal wins, another must lose. He also thinks that Camilla specifically gunned for him.
You wrote that she started a campaign in the British press to pave the way for a marriage, and you wrote, I even wanted Camilla to be happy. Maybe she'd be less dangerous if she was happy. Mm-hmm. How was she dangerous?
Because of the need for her to rehabilitate her image.
That made her dangerous?
That made her dangerous because of the connections that she was forging within the British press. And there was open willingness on both sides to trade of information. And with a family built on hierarchy, and with her on the way to being queen consort, there was going to be people or bodies left in the street because of that.
Harry says over the years he was one of those bodies. He accuses Camilla and even his father at times of using him or William to get better tabloid coverage for themselves. Prince Harry writes, Camilla, quote, sacrificed me on her personal PR altar.
I just don't believe it. I don't think it's a zero-sum game, and I don't think Camilla would have the audacity or ill will to gun for either prince. I just don't believe Camilla has been scheming for the crown for half a century now. I think she really loves Charles because she stuck with him even when her ever becoming queen was an extreme improbability. If anything, I think when Harry explains to us that this is how things work and this is what Camilla did, he's actually telling us that he fears this is how things work and this is the strategy he and Meghan are using.
She was the villain. She was the third person in the marriage. She needed to rehabilitate her image.
She was the villain. One of these things was not like the others. She needed to rehabilitate her image. I say tomato, you say tomato, Haza. Number 8. He says his family didn't give Meghan a chance due to unconscious biases and stereotypes they unwittingly picked up from the tabloids, totally dismissing their intuition and reasoning skills.
William was skeptical, disdainfully referring to Meghan as an American actress. Though Harry doesn't specify who, he says other members of the royal family were uneasy as well.
Right from the beginning, before they even had a chance to get to know her. And the UK press jumped on that, and here we are.
And what was that based on, that mistrust?
The fact that she was American, an actress, divorced, black, biracial, with a black mother. Those were just 4 of the typical stereotypes that becomes a feeding frenzy for the British press.
But all those things within the family also were sources of mistrust.
Yes, my family read the tabloids. It's laid out at breakfast when everyone comes together. So whether you walk around saying you believe it or not, it's still leaving an imprint in your mind. So if you have that judgment based on a stereotype right at the beginning, it's very, very hard to get over that. And a large part of it for the family, but also the British press and numerous other people, is like, he's changed. She must be a witch.
This is just ludicrous. I suppose their servants lay out the papers in the morning while they eat breakfast. I think this is pretty normal. I don't know why Harry thinks this impacts their analytical skills or emotional state. They've been seeing, evaluating, and reacting to the press their whole lives, and I'm sure improving at it with age. It seems highly unlikely that anyone in the royal family, except Harry, would be really thrown by coverage of themselves anymore. Number 9, more generally, Harry overestimates how much of an effect the press has on the public and public opinion. He uses the word imprint, like Meghan uses the word implant in the Netflix series, to describe people taking on the opinions of an abusive press, which they then mimic. I just don't think this phenomenon is real.
I went into this incredibly naive. I had no idea the British press was so bigoted. Hell, I was probably bigoted before the relationship with Meghan.
You think you were bigoted before the relationship with Meghan?
I don't know. Put it this way, I didn't see what I now see.
In this interview, Harry takes it even a step further, using the word radicalize to describe the effect of media on its readers. This is such a loaded term and honestly just insults the intelligence of the average Brit.
I will sit here and speak truth to you with the words that come out of my mouth, rather than using someone else, an unnamed source, to feed in lies or a narrative to a tabloid media that literally radicalizes its readers to then potentially cause harm to my family, my wife, my kids.
Number 10, he imagines his father and brother disagreed with him putting out that letter railing against the media for their critical coverage of Meghan before they were even married, and says he believes his father and brother were jealous of his chivalrous gesture to protect Meghan.
Soon after their relationship became public, Harry insisted on putting out a statement condemning some of the tabloid coverage of Meghan and what he called, quote, the racial undertones of comment pieces.
You write that your dad and your brother, William, were furious with you for doing that. Why?
They felt as though it made them look bad. They felt as though they didn't have a chance or weren't able to do that for their partners. What Meghan had to go through was similar in some part to what Kate and what Camilla went through. Very different circumstances. But then you add in the race element, which was what the British press jumped on straight away.
I highly doubt it. I think Charles and William thought it stunk of constitutional overreach, and Harry simply rejects that concept. He seems not to fully grasp the concept of free speech. He seems not to fully grasp the concept of constitutional monarchy. Okay, that's it for part 1. I have 10 more takeaways from the interview in part 2. Check back in, I don't know, 12 hours. Toodles. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.